For over 1,000 years, an entire civilization stopped its wars, put down its weapons, and gathered in peace, all to watch athletes compete in a festival so sacred that violating its truce was considered an act against the gods themselves. That is not mythology. That is documented history. And the story of how those ancient games survived, collapsed, disappeared for 15 centuries, and then came roaring back to become the most watched sporting event on Earth is one of the most extraordinary journeys in all of human civilization. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover exactly how the Olympics began, why they were banned, and how one obsessed 19th century Frenchman almost single-handedly brought them back from the dead. You will learn what the ancient games actually looked like, and the answer is far more violent and strange than anything you see today. And we will reveal the one uncomfortable truth about the modern Olympics that the International Olympic Committee would rather you never think too hard about. Stay with us, because this story has more drama, politics, and betrayal than any Hollywood script could invent. To understand the Olympics, you have to travel back to ancient Greece, specifically to a small valley in the northwestern Peloponnese called Olympia. This was not a city. It was a sanctuary, a sacred religious site dedicated to Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. And it was here, according to Greek tradition, that the first Olympic Games were held in 776 BC. That date is considered the official founding, though many historians believe athletic competitions at Olympia may have begun even earlier, perhaps as far back as 1200 BC. The sanctuary sat at the confluence of two rivers, the Alpheus and the Cladios, and it was considered holy ground. The Greeks did not see sport and religion as separate things. Athletic excellence was a form of worship. To compete at Olympia was to honor Zeus himself. The ancient games were held every 4 years, and this 4-year cycle was so important to Greek civilization that it became a unit of time. The Greeks literally measured history in Olympiads. When the Olympic truce was declared, called the Ekakeria, all warring city-states were required to stop fighting and allow safe passage to athletes and spectators traveling to Olympia. This truce was observed for centuries with remarkable consistency. Athletes came from across the Greek world, from mainland Greece, from Sicily, from Asia Minor, from North Africa. The Olympics were not just a sporting event. They were one of the few things that unified an otherwise deeply divided civilization. But what did those ancient games actually look like? Here is where history gets genuinely fascinating. The original Olympic program consisted of exactly one event, a short foot race called the Stadion, roughly 192 meters long, essentially the length of the stadium itself. That was it. The entire games, one race. The first recorded Olympic champion was a cook named Koroibos of Elis who won that single race in 776 BC. Over the following centuries, the program expanded dramatically. Wrestling was added. Then the pentathlon, combining running, jumping, discus, javelin, and wrestling. Then boxing. Then the pankration, which was essentially ancient mixed martial arts with almost no rules. Competitors could punch, kick, choke, and twist limbs. The only things prohibited were biting and eye gouging. Athletes competed completely naked. No clothing, no equipment, no protection. This was not accidental. The Greeks believed the naked human body in peak physical form was one of the most beautiful things in existence. But here is what nobody talks about when they describe the ancient Olympics as some pure, noble ideal. The games were deeply exclusive. Only free Greek-speaking men could compete. Women were banned entirely from even attending as spectators, under penalty of death, though evidence suggests this rule was not always strictly enforced. Slaves could not compete. Non-Greeks, called barbarians, were excluded. And the games were not amateur in any modern sense. Victorious athletes received enormous rewards from their home city-states. Statues were built in their honor. Poets like Pindar wrote victory odes celebrating their achievements. Winners received free meals for life in some cities. This was professionalism wrapped in the language of sacred devotion. The ancient Olympics continued for an astonishing 1,169 years, from 776 BC to 393 AD. Think about that timeline. The Roman Empire rose and fell within the lifespan of these games. Rome eventually absorbed Greece, and the Romans actually embraced the Olympics, with emperors like Nero famously competing, and just as famously cheating. Nero entered the chariot race at the 67 AD Games, fell off his chariot, never finished the race, and was still declared the winner because nobody dared tell the emperor otherwise. The end came in 393 AD. The Roman Emperor Theodosius I, a devout Christian, issued an edict banning all pagan festivals throughout the empire. The Olympics, as a festival dedicated to Zeus, were shut down permanently. The sacred sanctuary at Olympia was later destroyed, its temples demolished, its treasures scattered. Earthquakes and floods buried the ruins under meters of soil. For 15 centuries, the Olympics simply did not exist. They became legend, a memory preserved in ancient texts that most of the world had forgotten. So how did they come back? The answer leads us to one remarkable individual, Pierre de Coubertin, a French aristocrat and educator born in 1863. Coubertin was deeply troubled by France's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 and became convinced that French youth lacked physical and moral strength. He studied the British public school system, which emphasized sport as character building, and became obsessed with the idea of reviving the ancient Olympic ideal as a vehicle for international peace and youth development. He was not the first person to propose this. There had been smaller, regional revivals, most notably the Zappos Olympics in Greece in the 1850s and 1860s. But Coubertin had the organizational drive and the political connections to make it truly global. In 1894, Coubertin convened an international congress in Paris and persuaded delegates from 12 nations to support his vision. The International Olympic Committee was founded that year, and Athens was chosen as the host city for the first modern Olympic Games in 1896. Those inaugural modern games featured 241 athletes from 14 nations competing in 43 events. The United States, despite being a new nation with no particular Olympic tradition, sent a team of mostly track and field athletes who dominated their events. The Games were considered a triumphant success, and the revival was real. But here is the uncomfortable truth that gets buried beneath all the idealism. The modern Olympics have never fully escaped politics, money, or national ego. From the very beginning, the Games became a theater for geopolitical posturing. The 1936 Berlin Games under Adolf Hitler were explicitly used as Nazi propaganda, designed to showcase Aryan supremacy, until Jesse Owens, a black American athlete, won for gold medals and demolished that narrative in front of the entire world. The 1980 Moscow Games were boycotted by the United States and 65 other nations over the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The Soviet Union and its allies retaliated with a boycott of the 1984 Los Angeles Games. Doping scandals have plagued the Games for decades, with the 1988 Seoul Games producing perhaps the most famous positive test in history when Ben Johnson was stripped of his 100-meter gold medal. State-sponsored doping programs, most visibly from Russia, have forced entire nations to compete under neutral flags. And yet the Olympics endure. Over 200 nations now participate. The 2020 Tokyo Games, held in 2021 due to the global pandemic, were watched by over 3 billion people worldwide. Athletes like Usain Bolt, Simone Biles, and Michael Phelps have become global icons not just of sport but of human potential. The Paralympic Games, a parallel event created in 1960 and now held alongside every Summer Olympics, have transformed global attitudes toward athletes with disabilities. The Games have been hosted on 6 continents and have grown from 43 events in Athens to over 300 events in Tokyo. The story of the Olympics, from that first simple foot race in a sacred valley in Greece 28 centuries ago to the billion-dollar global spectacle of today, is ultimately a story about what human beings value most. Competition. Excellence. Before you go, if you learned something valuable today, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to History Vault YT for a brand new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.